Right. I'd like to call the Pocosin City School Board meeting for September 21st to order. We will start with Marissa Woodruff, who is a sixth grader at Pocosin Middle School. She enjoys sports and dance, and Marissa plays volleyball, basketball, and is a member of the Pocosin Dance Academy. She has a career ambition of becoming a nurse. All right. So we'll start with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to share a poem titled Kindness by Carly Dugmore. It doesn't matter where you go or who you meet along the way. Carry kindness in your heart and practice it each day. A simple smile can change the course of someone else's week. The smallest gesture represents the gift of joy we seek. A gentle touch reminds us that humanity still reigns. To pet a lonely cat or dog shows that love will never wane. There are a million obstacles on any given day, but rise above the hate and fear and live life the kindness way.
That was wonderful. All right. Do we have any additions or modifications to the agenda?
No, ma'am, we do not.
All right. I guess we'll go on to presentations and reports, starting with the school opening update by Mr.
My favorite part about school is that we get to go back to school and we finally get to learn and that we get to socialize
Well, good evening. While they're trying to get our slides set up there, I was planning to, tonight's meeting, to say we're welcome back to our normal school year. And there was a lot of high hopes that that's what we would all be doing, and we would be talking about the beginning of our strategic planning, which we're very excited about, and we are going to be talking about that. But we still have a ways to go with dealing with the immediate pressures of the pandemic. So as we have done now for quite a few months, we'll be talking a little bit about our current mitigation and what we're doing and what's working and what our challenges are, because they are still quite serious. I want to start by first thanking, again, like I have been accustomed to do, because I realize every single day when we begin our work, the enormous challenges that our school leaders and teachers, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, custodians are facing, in addition to the things that they signed up for originally when they decided to join our profession. And I just can't thank that group enough, because it really is above and beyond the call of duty. We're going to be talking a little bit about details of contact tracing tonight, which I know is, we've gotten a lot of questions. So when we get a lot of questions about things, I like to share with you folks those answers. So, because I know that when I get a lot of questions, you're getting a lot of questions. So we'll be talking about that, but that pressure falls on the laps of our school leaders every day. And it's not just Monday through Friday during work hours. A lot of times on Sunday evenings and Saturday night, they're in the middle of looking at film and seeing where students were sitting to see if someone has to be quarantined. So I want to thank them. A lot of those folks are here. Mary Arlino, our new Director of Student Services, who leads this charge, and of course all of our principals, assistant principals, our school nurses and teachers, the list goes on and on and on. So I just wanted to start by thanking them again publicly for all their hard work and efforts, not only in the education of our children, which is what they signed up to do, but also now in keeping folks safe during extraordinary times. I don't think it's a mistake to constantly remind ourselves of what our focus is, our mission, in addition to educating children, which has always been our mission, but it's to make sure we get kids in school and keep them there 5 days a week. That's the law that was passed in March for all 133 school divisions in the state, and that's our primary focus. So every decision that we make administratively centers around that goal right now. And it seems like a crazy goal. I've been in this business 30 years, and we've had a lot of goals over the years as we try to move the needle instructionally, as we provide more opportunities for kids. But now we're saying we want kids to come to school every day. That's a primary goal, and it's sad on some levels to think that has become our focus. This is the law, shared it with you the last couple of meetings, that guides this work that the General Assembly in Virginia has challenged us to make sure that we keep our kids in school 180 days, minimum of 990 hours. And that's what we are very serious about and going to do everything we can to make that happen. Unfortunately, as you've seen, and we'll see some numbers tonight, and we monitor every day, that's becoming increasingly challenging. This is a simple slide that illustrates what the experts, depending on who you listen and watch and read about, will say about ways to mitigate and protect ourselves from this virus. And again, get back to our primary goal of keeping our kids in school every day so that they can learn at high levels. But I won't belabor the point, but it is multi-layered. You can't do one thing and protect kids in this environment, and teachers and then families at home. You have to do lots of things every day and do them with fidelity, and these are not new to any of you. We've talked about them over and over and over again, but we stress that constantly in our schools. Let's do this thing right so that we can keep our kids in school for 180 days. Just a few points from the opening of school. Of course, we started on the first day of our calendar, September the 7th, on time. And we have approximately 2,776 students as of count last week. And that's up a bit from our low point last year. If you remember, we reported we had a dip in enrollment, as most school divisions did around the state, and we were held harmless from the loss of funds from that, which was a great advantage for us. But our numbers are back up to where they were pre-pandemic times, so we're feeling really good about that number. About 65% of our kids are riding the bus. Now, that would be great news ordinarily, because we we like when kids ride the bus. It puts less cars. Barbara will appreciate that. Less cars pulling around in the driveway, stacking up on Pocosin Avenue, and Kim will appreciate that, and Andrew from Odd Road. And so riding the bus is a great thing, but now we have the challenge of being able to transport all of our kids on our buses for a couple of reasons. One, we know we can't put all of our kids on the bus 3 feet apart, which is the benchmark. So some of our kids are on buses closer than 3 feet. And what that means is when a student rides that bus that finds out they are positive for COVID, the kids around that student have to quarantine. So it's an additional challenge that we face by transporting kids to school that we never thought of before. You've all ridden school buses, and you put 2 kids to a seat, and you put 77 kids on a bus, and you bring them to school. You do that, and any positive case with those proximities require multiple kids to quarantine based on the requirements from the health department. So, good number. We want more kids to ride the bus, but challenging nonetheless. And of course, at this time, we're running our normal bell schedules. Some logistical challenges we face that we're working through and continue to work through in the spirit of transparency. We had bus delays the first week of school. I know that wasn't a surprise to any of you for the reasons we just talked about. In addition to that, our buses are all driven by human beings, and some of those wonderful bus drivers had to quarantine during the first few days of school. So when the bus driver quarantines, you got to have a substitute bus driver. And in a national bus driver shortage, you don't have a substitute bus driver. So that requires delays, and Mr. Pappas will give you some details about that. I won't belabor the point, but that is a challenge. Availability of substitutes for our classrooms as teachers are quarantining. We have a very limited number of substitutes, and that we keep begging and pleading, and this is a selfish plea. Anybody out there listening who would like to join our team, we would love to have you. We're always looking for substitutes. I actually contacted our liaison with the military community today, and we're asking if some folks who are in the military would like to join us. We'd love to have their support, and they would be wonderful substitutes, bus drivers, teachers. So we're partnering with everybody we can to try to find additional folks who want to join our team. Of course, teacher canvas pages was new to our teachers last year, and they've grown enormously, but there's still work to be done as we grow the assignments and interactivity of those pages, because that's our primary line of instructional delivery for students who are out sick, quarantining, is to be able to access instruction every day from those pages interactively. We do have some teachers who are also using our technology that we invested in last year to live stream those courses, and we've asked that our teachers do that lesson specific. Some lessons really need that live streaming for kids to get the concept, and some can be done through postings on our Canvas pages. So all of that process is evolving as we learn how to teach school in a pandemic. We have, like I said, updated our resources from monies available, made available from grants from the federal government that you guys are familiar with, and we've talked about the 3 installments of that those monies, and the third one we have just applied for recently and should be receiving a significant amount of money that we will be using to, again, invest in these things moving forward. And of course, every tool you buy requires training to use it. So there's ongoing professional development as we learn to use these additional resources. And then the last bullet, and we'll talk about this unfortunately more often, the quarantining and contact tracing. So just to the data for a minute, we'll look, and I won't bore you with all of this because you all see it every day on your news feeds. You can log on to VDH and get a lot of this data, which is our primary source. Everybody I talk to seems like has their daily diet of where they get their information about COVID, and I'm always learning about new places to explore and find data, but we have plenty of it. This is just a simple color-coded map that's easy to look at. This is our country. And if you'll remember, I showed this same slide a month ago when we met, and it was all red. There was no other colors on the map. We were in high transmission around the United States. What we saw from early July was a steady increase of Delta variant taking over, making up about 97% of the COVID cases. We're all Delta, highly transmittable, and extremely contagious, about double the contagion of the previous variants. So what I love about this map right now is you start to see some other colors. If you'll notice from the south, which kind of and Midwest, which kind of got a hold of the Delta earlier, you'll see some color changes. I was talking to Mr. Childress earlier this evening, and he had run across some data showing even some slight decreases even in our state in monitoring numbers closely from some prestigious universities that are tracking this data daily. So there is some signs of good news, and I'm a glass half full kind of guy, and so whenever I get a chance to look at some of this, I get very hopeful. These are just numbers as of yesterday from the state of Virginia. You'll notice we're at 836 cases cumulative from March 2020 when they this started, hospitalizations, and unfortunately the death rate. We drill down to Pocosin. This data tends to lag on VDH website about a week or more. So this is the current data that's available there. We're showing 407 per 100,000 of transmission rate. We've seen that number down over the early part of the summer to very low, 30 or 40 cases per 100,000, and we've seen it as high as 600 or 700 cases per 100,000 at the peak of the pandemic. So this number, as you can see from the chart, is climbing even in Pocosin, but we do believe this is a week-old data that we're starting to see some levels, and those folks that I've talked to are in the medical profession are starting to see in the various hospitals and places that we're seeing a little leveling of this, and maybe even a downturn in cases and hospitalization. So that's, again, I hope really good news. Our PCR, our positivity rate, is at 17.1 as of yesterday, and that number I've seen as low as negative, interestingly enough. And we hovered over the summer at 1 or 2, 3%, and now we're up at 17.1, and we were at 29.7 at the highest rate that I recall from last year. So that just gives you a perspective of where we are with the case positivities. State vaccination, you can see this. I won't bore you with all the slides. What I focus on is that 12 to 17, 12 through 17, which is the eligible ages for our students who can receive the vaccine. And this is state data, just over 51% in that category, and you can read the others. And if you look at Pocosin, we're lagging a little behind on that, but a little glimmer of good news on this too. That number is 52 or 3 with 1 dose. So that means some people are in the cycle of getting vaccinated in this age bracket, and so those numbers are going up. That is, I believe, good news on a couple of fronts. One, the science is still telling us that it helps protect people from getting sick. But secondly, on an operational, from an operational standpoint, from our perspective, vaccinated people don't have to quarantine. So if people want to go to school the next day and they have a possible exposure, if they're fully vaccinated, they're not required to quarantine. So that protection is still driving the quarantine rules, and that could change, I don't know, because I do know there are breakthrough cases and all of that, but this is still, from an operational standpoint, our best way to keep kids, again, back to our goal, in school every day, kids and teachers. This is comparative data and it's cumulative data. So if you look at the far right, this is a chart that you are used to seeing, and it's published on our website and updated daily for the community to see. We had 64 cases, and you can see where they were located for the entire school year last year. This is data from the first few days of school. From the 6th of September to yesterday, and we're at 45 positive cases already. Just illustrating again that the Delta variant is twice as contagious. This is our numbers broken out. We've been requested to look at this. Some of you even have requested that we look at this from where the quarantine is initiated, because there is some logic in looking at how we can better improve our protection in certain spots. We know that we're vulnerable at lunch because kids remove their masks to eat. So there's another level of that as well. It's difficult to have everybody separated while eating because we have limited spaces. We are encouraging more outside eating. We've purchased additional picnic tables and are encouraging more outside activity for obvious reasons. But you'll notice from those, still the vast majority of our kids are coming in contact and having to quarantine from home and community events. That number has maintained the highest throughout this. And again, this is just from that date range, so it's just from the first day of school till now. And you'll notice that those quarantine numbers do have athletics. We've seen, believe it or not, smaller numbers on buses than we had anticipated, so that is a good sign. These are the kids who are currently, as of today, learning virtually because of quarantine. Those numbers fluctuate. Some kids are learning virtually that way today, but they'll end their quarantine tomorrow and come back to school. And so that is a fluid process. And if you study the quarantine rules, which unfortunately our principals and Mary have become experts in, you know that there's several ways to return back to normal activity after a quarantine. One is the normal 10 days that we use as our benchmark. The CDC still recommends the optimum of 14 days, but they allow, where practical, a 10-day quarantine. And then we also have the option to, on day 5 of a quarantine with no symptoms, to show a negative professionally administered test and then return after day 7. So again, we're trying back to our original goal, get kids, teachers in school as often as possible every day. And so that is the reason that we are very intentional about how we contact trace. I'm going to talk about something else that's going to help that be more user-friendly as we move forward. But these are numbers you can look at. Again, they're available on our website. If you remember the slide back to the layered mitigation, layered approach to protecting ourselves from COVID and our families, one of the things recommended is testing. There's 2 paths of testing. One is diagnostic testing, and that's when someone either has symptoms or they're, like I just indicated, they're trying to reduce their quarantine time. They're not sick, no symptoms, but they need to get back in school, so on day 5 they can take a test. We want to make that available to our families so they can readily get that done and get back in school. What we've heard is that's been very problematic. There's limited tests. The clinics and pharmacies are backed up in trying to administer these tests. There's a high demand because of the high rate of transmission. So people are needing this service. My own daughter needed to get a test a few weeks ago, and we couldn't find one anywhere around. So this has been a challenge. We want to make that available to families immediately when they need it, either symptomatic or asymptomatic and trying to get out of quarantine to get back in school. So this will be available for students and staff, and we are going to make that effective immediately. So we had, if you'll remember last year in April, I presented to you a grant that we applied for, allowing and training our nurses and allowing a product that was approved to be used to administer a rapid test with results in about 15 minutes, available to anybody who had symptoms at school, so the family didn't have to take them out to see the doctor or whatever and wait for a 3-day period in some cases to get a PCR test. We did that throughout the end of last year successfully. We also had the opportunity in that same grant to do random testing, which would be screening tests. So you could take the football team, for example, test them and know if you've got COVID on your football team before symptoms show up. So that was our opportunity in the grant. We chose not to do the screening, but only the diagnostic because we were kind of at the end of the year. We have that grant still ongoing, so we're going to use that grant and those available resources, again, free to us and free to the end user, to make that available, of course, all with parent permission, to help serve our community to get these results quickly and get kids back in school and keep them in school if there are symptoms. Another new thing that we've just been made aware of from the Virginia Department of Education, they have contracted with several companies with federal money, again, free to the end user, which would be us, the school division, a program called VISTA, which is another screening opportunity that comes with staffing. So it doesn't burden our staff. The grant, through this pot of money, allows us to access tests, staff to help administer the test, staff to help contact trace, and so we are excited about that. The logistics are being worked out as we speak. It's not going to happen tomorrow. We're going to use our current grant to be able to do what I just described immediately, but this will help us in an ongoing way to continue to test as we need to in both diagnostic and screening. But our primary focus right now is diagnostic. So if someone has symptoms, students or staff, or is trying to gain access back to school from getting off of quarantine, these programs, the current one and the one we're committed to participate in, will help facilitate that. So we're very excited about that opportunity. And again, this is partnership with the Virginia Department of Health, the Virginia Department of Education, and several private contractors through federal money to make this happen. And again, I won't bore you with the details, but they do provide testing vendors, supplies, staffing, incentives, support, and then the school's responsibility will be to identify the groups that need to be tested. So if someone, if we decide we want to test a pool of students, we can. That's not our primary focus right now. Again, our primary focus is diagnostic, but we can moving forward if we choose. And I would certainly bring that before this board if we start to move in that direction to see, do we want to start identifying groups of students, a certain grade level at a time, or a extracurricular group to test, so that you get random samples of where COVID might be, so you can then stop the spread before it happens. So these again are part of the layered approach. We would provide space and time, and of course implement the containment mitigation guidance that we get from VDH and comply with the reporting requirements that are all governed by HIPAA and state guidelines. As well as we did last year, we partnered with the city of Pocosin to offer for our staff and students throughout the year, as vaccines became available, clinics. Many of you participated and worked those clinics and helped. It was a community effort, and our city was ahead of the game in how efficiently we were able to get our staff at about 88% fully vaccinated last year. So we want to continue those opportunities with some private companies, maybe local pharmacies to make these vaccines, again, as they become more available and maybe even at different age brackets, again, opportunities for folks who choose to get vaccinated. That was a lot in a short period of time, so questions? I know you may have some. No questions? Great. Thank you.
Give us enough numbers. We're still digesting.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. Right. I would like to have Marissa Woodruff's mom come on up and give us the financial update.
All right. Good evening, Chair Sheeler and members of the school board. This evening, you will be considering approval of the CIP plan for FY22 through beyond FY27. Mr. Tillett did review this with you in the work session, but I'm going to go over a few highlights of this plan. We are revising the FY22 request for two reasons. First, there are two projects that we were able to complete already. You may recall that last year we utilized coronavirus relief funds to cover the PHS gym HVAC project to increase the air quality in this area. Then the city was able to include the PMS turf field replacement project in the PMS modernization borrowing, and this was just completed earlier this month. Second, we are including some additional items on this year's CIP as the city may be able to utilize some COVID funds they are receiving along with other funds they have available. We had a consultant assess the primary school HVAC system, and they found that the system has exceeded its useful life and requires immediate attention. There are two options to consider for this upgrade. Previously, we had chiller and/or water pumps and re-insulate the water lines as future CIP projects, so this upgrade addresses both of these. The first option is a full replacement, which has a useful life of 30 years and an estimated cost of $4.1 million. And the second option is a partial replacement and repair and has a 15-year useful life and has an estimated cost of $2 million. The next project proposed is the addition of a traffic control loop at the Pocosin High School. You can see on the diagram to the right that shows the proposed location to add an asphalt driveway and sidewalk behind the school building to allow one-way traffic. There is significant congestion on Odd Road, particularly in the morning during the drop-off times. This project should help alleviate this congestion and has an estimated cost of $175,000, which includes some tree removal and other site work. We currently have 6 buses that are over 15 years old, which is the age the state recommends replacement. So we are requesting replacement of 2 conventional 77 passenger buses, which would be gas powered and have air conditioning. And that estimated cost is $214,000. If we're able to replace those, that helps get us closer to the state requirement, so that would be very helpful. This last slide just shows the full plan for consideration tonight. We did not change any of the previous projects that we had for the out years on the plan. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. And now, the much anticipated operations update by Steve Pappas.
Good evening, School Board, Chairman Sheeler, Superintendent Tillett. So, if you've been driving down the road, you've seen that there's been a lot of movement in the school modernization program. I'll save that for the next meeting. But today I'd like to just talk a little bit about food service. And these are some factors that are impacting food service for 2021. And obviously green is go and red is not optimal. But all students are eating free under the seamless summer option that was offered to us. Normally we're under the National School Lunch Program. But across the nation, everybody now in K-12 is utilizing seamless summer option. That means all students eat for free, breakfast and lunch every day. Now, concomitant with that, unfortunately, the same time, we're dealing with increased food costs. You've all felt it yourselves due to inflation. We're also having significant supply chain disruption in our ability to get certain foods, and these aren't difficult foods. We're not getting escargot, we're getting Captain Crunch or whatever it might be, and you can't get them. Supply chain disruption, which I just referred to, increased cost of individual packaging. What we're doing to help minimize any potential contacting or contracting COVID through contact is things are being individually wrapped. There's no more going through and scooping out. And then, of course, the labor shortage that people are finding. We're having people work excessive hours just to get the jobs done. So this is great news. This compares at all 4 schools the breakfast utilization or capture, if you will. And you can see that this is only the month of September because we just started. But look at the difference, what happens when you're giving away free breakfast versus when you have to pay for it. And that's a significant change that will help food service under the given constraints that it's operating. Lunch as well is experiencing quantum changes in capture. And then this is just showing you the total meals, breakfast and lunch for 2019. So you go, why didn't you do 2020? Well, 2020 was COVID year. We were distributing food from buses. You can't compare the two. So this is apples and apples, in school and in school. I'll go back and just say, this is helpful to us because, as you know, food service is not supported by the school budget. It has to be self-supporting. And with this change, getting these extra meals in, each meal, we get funds to backfill the cost of those. So having the extra meals is very helpful to our food service bottom line. Now we'll move on to the trials and tribulations of transportation, which is alliteration for any K-12 students. You needed to know that for your SAT. So we are experiencing, just like the rest of the nation, a driver shortage. We are down 20% of our drivers as of Thursday. That's a significant. I was driving today. Not a bus, because I can't, but I was driving a vehicle to transport students who go to any number of locations outside of our city. So if I'm driving, that's like having Artie flipping hamburgers. So it's a problem. So what are the options available to us as we are suffering, as the rest of the nation and local school divisions are, a lack of bus drivers? Ours are due to, as you can imagine, I already mentioned, people are out with various forms of illness, operations, COVID. Some people have decided it's too much to do, so we're down. So our options are splitting runs, and we're working on that. That means currently if we have 12 buses to cover the middle school, we're trying to now cut it down to 11 buses by saying, okay, the kids who go on that bus are now going to go here on this bus and this bus. In some cases, we're splitting 3 times so that we will be late to a school, but only marginally, so it doesn't cascade into a much more significant delay. Van and car transportation, if possible. Well, that's what's happening with me driving and our transportation operations clerk who drove and has been driving every day recently. Then there's something called doubling back, and that comes with delays. Doubling back, we have 4 tiers. We have high school, middle, elementary, and primary. So we're out, all of our drivers are out each of those times. That's 4 flights. So what happens if we have to double back because we have less drivers than we can facilitate with splitting or van running. And when we run a van, what we do is a driver who's driving a bus out of town to take kids to the governor's school, we'll take them all in cars all those students, and then that bus driver's free to backfill for one of our 4 in-town flights. But if we have to double back, what that means is the first driver who gets done dropping off kids at home to go home from the high school, they run back to pick up route number 99. But that means they're not available for the middle school. And then we have to hold another route back at the middle school. And then we leave the middle school, and then we go to the elementary school. The driver who was double backed at the high school can now get to the elementary school, and it just makes for big delays. But that is one of our options. The next more draconian measure is to modify the start times of schools. And if you've been seeing the newspaper, Williamsburg, James City County is now in the process of testing a 10-minute delay in the start of schools to give bus drivers who are already doing what I've aforementioned time to get back before everybody just keeps getting later and later and later. We're hoping not to have to do those things, but I will tell you that's in the toolbox, and we're already at stage dot number 2. So we have a need for bus drivers. We have a need for parents who want to drive cars to take kids. We're open to a lot of creative, out-of-the-box ideas, and if you want to learn how to be a bus driver, we will provide paid training. We will give you an abbreviated training for people who already have a CDL but don't have a student endorsement. All of those are options. I just was on the phone today with the Department of Education, transportation folks, and our starting wage is over $16 an hour for drivers. And that's the transportation news. And concludes my presentation.
Pappas, any questions, comments? Huge challenge. I don't know how you do it. You have to keep a good sense of humor. All right, Dr. Hill, we invite you up for an instructional update.
Madam Chairperson, Superintendent Tillett, members of the school board. This evening, I would like to provide you with an update on some of the activities that we've been engaging in and will be engaging in. The exciting thing about being back in our schools in person, face-to-face, is that we get to spend time focusing on teaching and learning and professional development. So we have letters, training, and I had alluded to this at our last board meeting, but that's a language essentials program for teachers of reading and spelling, so focusing on our K-5 students and how to help mitigate some of the gaps that they may be experiencing. We also have another professional development called Language Live, and that's for our older students in grades 5 to 12. And then in Virginia, for our students with disabilities, there's an assessment model. It's referred to as the VAP. It's the Virginia Alternative Assessment Program. And traditionally in the past, that's been a portfolio-based assessment where teachers would have a list of all of the standards of learning, and then throughout the year they would collect artifacts, samples of student work. We would collect them in these large binders. We would have teams come together to assess those, and then we would submit those to the VDOE. And so this year, that process is going to be replaced with a new multiple choice assessment. And so, of course, we have to train our staff on what that will entail. But it will be reduced in depth, breadth, and complexity. And then, of course, our IEPs for our students with disabilities, we will be using an online system for that to help streamline, eliminate some of the paper pencil work that's done, and we training teachers with that. And VASL is actually an organization. It's the Virginia School Consortium for Learning, and it's a consortium of over 60 school divisions across the Commonwealth that since 2007 have been coming together. Representatives from all of those school divisions are creating assessment items, and actually the VDOE that's endorsed by Dr. Lane and many of our SOL test items are based on that work. So we have representation from Pocosin on a variety of grade levels and content areas on those work groups. So it helps inform our practice of teaching and learning if we have an understanding of how those assessment items are created. And then finally, we continue to provide everyone with an update weekly regarding the online professional development that's offered from VDOE and a variety of other organizations. So that's been one of the benefits that has come out of COVID, is that there is a plethora of professional development opportunities available. So as we promised at the last board meeting, the large item that we want to discuss with you is the new student growth assessment and what that process will look like. So I will hand it over to Dr. Ratliff, and he'll provide you with an update on that process.
Dr. Hill.
Good evening, Mr. Tillett, Ms. Sheeler, and board members. Tonight I'm going to discuss with you the Virginia Department of Education growth assessments that are currently being implemented across the state. Legislation was passed in the 2021 General Assembly that requires the implementation of through-year growth assessments in reading and mathematics in grades 3 through 8. In the 2021-2022 school year, the legislation calls for the administration of a fall assessment and a spring assessment in grades 3 through 8 in reading and mathematics, and this measures the students' growth throughout the year. The fall assessment, which is what we're getting ready to work on, is the actual growth assessment, and the spring assessment will be the traditional SOL assessment that the kids take. Full implementation of the legislation will not occur until school year 22-23. Within that year, the content areas and grade levels are still reading and mathematics in grades 3 through 8. However, there is a change, and the growth assessments then become a fall, a mid-year, and an end-of-the-year assessment, with the end-of-the-year assessment continuing to be the SOL assessment. Growth assessments that measure individual student growth will become an integral part to accreditation process in the schools in Virginia, in which the grade levels in grades 3 through 8 range is taught. The Department of Education has developed shorter computer adaptive tests for the growth assessments. These computer adaptive tests use existing SOL questions that have been in place in the past. These assessments are administered to students based on the student's grade level and the grade level's content. The normally occurring SOL computer adaptive assessments that are administered in grades 3 through 8, reading and mathematics, in the spring will serve as the growth assessment and the summative assessment for the accountability purposes. Again, the growth assessment's getting ready to take place. This will be compared with the spring SOL that's given, and that's how growth is going to be measured. The testing window for Pocosin is September 20th through September 30th. However, we do anticipate testing to go past the September 30th point in order to give those that aren't in the face-to-face environment ample opportunity to continue to get the test taken. All online growth assessments, which are shorter computer adaptive tests, will be completed in one day. Grades 3 through 8 reading tests range between 17 and 19 items, while the grades 3 through 8 mathematics tests range between 20 and 25 items. Paper tests for this year are full-length SOL tests that have been given in the past, probably in the last several years. Because of this, the paper tests, you can have a break within the test, or they can be given over a couple of day range. In the future, those requiring paper tests will not be quite as long as they are now. However, at this point, they are full-length SOL tests. There is no passing or failing score for either the reading or the mathematics when you're measuring growth. There are no scaled scores, there are no performance levels, there are no reporting category scores that are going to be given. Following the growth assessment, a student detail by question report is going to be released. This report shows us the successes and where areas of improvement are needed with the students. This report gives a great deal of information that will actually inform instruction for the teachers and really show the students and parents where areas of weakness are and where strengths are. The growth assessments provide insight and guidance for instruction for the unfinished learning that potentially may have taken place due to the pandemic over this past school year. The Department of Education is also creating a parent portal that give parents timely access to students' testing results. This portal likely will also go on throughout the students' testing. So once they take an SOL test, the parents will likely be able to get onto the portal and see that. So I imagine that will continue to be ongoing. For the current school year, growth will be measured by comparing the spring 22 SOL scores. That's the SOLs that we're going to be taking around May to June, against the spring SOL 21 SOL scores, or this current year's growth assessments. In other words, the end of the year SOLs will be measured against either the growth assessment now or last year's SOL scores, one of the two. Whichever shows the greatest growth will be the measure that's used for accreditation purposes by the state. Growth beginning in the 22-23 school year will be computed using scores from the beginning of the year assessment, the middle of the year assessment, and those compared with the end of the year SOL assessment. This concludes my presentation on the upcoming growth assessments for our school division. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
A quick question for you. Is the test going to be the same one? Are they going to take the same test in the fall and the spring?
Not necessarily. When they administer the computer adaptive test, basically what that does is the test levels per the student's ability depending upon how the student answers the question. So while all of those tests may be pulling from the same item bank, they may not be necessarily the same tests that they're taking. They're going to be measured on the same ability level. So the cadre of questions that they may pull are leveled at the same level as one another, but not necessarily the exact same questions.
So with the SDBT reports, I could get a low-level question in the fall and get a high-level question in the spring.
Well, I don't know the exact formula for the growth. Basically, they will be using a vertical progress table when they measure that. My understanding is they are going to take into account things such as that, whether it's a high-level question, a medium-level question, or a low-level question, when the growth is calculated for the student throughout. But
So I just basically just bomb it in the fall and do good in the spring?
I hope our students don't do that, but it would that would show growth.
I got a question. So would this be a tool to determine gifted students as well?
No, not necessarily. The gifted assessments that we use are more of intelligence tests. We do pull in the achievement tests as the kids get older to help and buttress whether kids qualify or whether they don't qualify. But there are many different factors that we look at, but two of the primary things that we're looking at when we're identifying for gifted services are the achievement test and them scoring in the 96th percentile and above, just dependent on the area and whether you're looking at reading or math. So you're kind of looking at two different things, an achievement versus ability. Thank you.
Dr. Radcliffe? Members, do we have any public comment this evening? All right. So then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Ms. Helso, would
That includes A, approval of minutes of August regular meeting, work session, closed meeting, and special meeting. B, approval of financial report. C, approval of personnel action. And D, authorization to change appropriation and to accept and expend funds in accordance with some attached request.
Do I have a motion to approve consent agenda?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Ms. Reimers?
Mr. Ingram?
Aye.
Mr. Freeman?
Aye.
Mr. Childress?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hessel?
Aye.
Chairman Shearer?
Aye.
Motion passes.
We'll move on to other matters for consideration. And Mr. Tillett?
Yes, Madam Chair, as you learned in our work session, we do have a comprehensive capital improvement plan that we believe addresses immediate needs and even some long-range projects. And so we recommend approval of that capital plan to send on to City Council for their consideration.
Excellent. Does anybody have any comments or discussion points? I'll entertain a motion to approve the consideration of PCPS Capital Improvement Plan 22 to 27.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Reimers?
Mr. Ingram?
Aye.
Mr. Freeman?
Aye.
Mr. Childress?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hessel? Aye. Chairman Shearer?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you, Ms. Reimers. All right, and Mr. Tillett, the next item up is the approval of the reading to the changes to the policy manual.
Absolutely, and as you guys are very much accustomed, we look at our policies on an ongoing basis, and there's changes either in General Assembly action or in some area that we as a community want to visit. We edit those policies along the way. So you guys are used to having done that many times over the years, and we try to keep that in a handful of policies at a time so you have time to study them carefully. What we brought this time to your attention is about 8 policies that do overlap with new legislation that was passed in this last term in March specifically. And our attorneys have, as always, vetted those policies carefully, and we found that our current policies that have been in place meet the standard of those new laws. So all we have done is amended those policies with simply a reference, legal reference to the new law. And again, it affects several of our policies, and you guys were given opportunity about a month ago to study these policies and make sure that you didn't want to make additional changes. So unless additional changes are requested tonight, we ask that you consider waiving a second reading so that we can go ahead and get those policies in place and action now, as one of the policy or one of the laws that is referenced on several of our policies indicates beginning of this school year approval. So it is somewhat timely. So we recommend approval, first reading. Thank you.
Chairman Shearer, if I may, I'd like to make a motion, if we could, to waive the second reading of the changes to the policy manual. And that way we just take the actions of these revisions and only first reading this time.
Do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
No.
Was that Mr. Ingram or Mr. Freeman?
So we will need to vote, Ms. Reimers, on the motion to
Mr. Ingram?
Abstain.
Mr. Freeman?
Aye.
Mr. Childress?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hessel?
Aye.
Chairman Shearer?
aye.
Motion passes 5, 1 abstention.
Okay, I'll now entertain the consideration of approval for the final reading of the changes to the policy manual. Any comments about that? Discussion points?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All right, Ms. Reimers?
Mr. Ingram? Mr. Freeman?
Aye.
Mr. Childers?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hessel?
Aye.
Chairman Sheeler? Motion passes 5-1 abstention.
All right, our next item is consideration of the approval for proclamations for the National School Lunch Week. So whereas over 123 million student lunches were served in Virginia's public schools, and whereas studies have shown that access to nutritional programs such as the National School Lunch Program and National School Breakfast Program that Mr. Pappas was telling us about, helps to create a strong learning environment for children and helps to improve children's concentration in classrooms. And whereas school lunches are healthier than ever, meet nutritious guidelines, provide the right balance of protein, dairy, whole grains, fruits, and veggies, and research has shown that students who eat school meals perform their best academically. And whereas the National School Lunch Program is dedicated to the health and well-being of our nation's children, now therefore be it proclaimed on this 21st day of September in the year 2021 by the School Board of the City of Pocosin, Virginia, that the week of October 11 to 15, 2021 will hereby be celebrated as the National School Lunch Week in all Pocosin City public schools. And then we also have a consideration approval for Bullying Prevention Month. I'm going to roll right into that. So, whereas school bullying has become an increasingly significant problem in the United States and Virginia, whereas over 20% of the youth in the United States are estimated to be involved in bullying each year, as a bully or as a victim. And bullying can take many forms, including verbal, physical, and most recently in cyberspace, and can happen in many places on and off school grounds. And whereas an estimated 160,000 students in kindergarten through 12th grade miss school due to a fear of being bullied, whereas it is important for Pocosin parents, students, teachers, and school administrators to be aware of bullying and to encourage discussion of the problem as a school community. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed on this 21st day of September in the year 2021 by the School Board of the City of Pocosin at the month of October 2021 as Bullying Prevention Month, with the intention that the issue of bullying and its prevention be discussed in Pocosin schools and classrooms during that time. So do I have a motion to approve these proclamations?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, Ms. Reimers?
Mr. Ingram?
Aye.
Mr. Freeman?
Aye.
Mr. Childers?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hessel?
Aye.
Chairman Sheeler?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to communications or other matters by the school board or the superintendent. Do you have anything more to say, Mr. Tillett?
Just one final announcement that has been a long time coming. We set out to, when I first got here, to begin the process of strategic planning, something that I'm very excited about and our staff is excited about. And the pandemic interrupted that for a year, so we are excited to announce that we will begin that process in October. We've contracted with a company called K-12 Insight that will help facilitate some of the heavy lifting on the side of data collection and focus group facilitation. We intend to reach out to our community, both community organizations, community leaders, as well as our parents, faculty and staff, of course, and even our students, to receive feedback and input through focus groups, asking very important questions, primarily around what we're doing really well, what we can improve on, and very specifically what areas we need to look at for those areas of improvement. And lastly, what are your hopes and dreams for your kids and their future? So we want to build a strategic plan that will take us and guide our work into the next 5 years, getting very focused on areas that we can improve to take Pocosin from a really, really good school system to the best school system in the state. So it's fun work, exciting work, and very important work. So we're happy to get that ball rolling in October. So that's my only report.
Excellent, excellent. Mr. Ingram?
Yeah, I want to congratulate the administration and the teachers for a successful start of the school year. And, you know, we said that we were going to revisit and, you know, look at the mask mandate, you know, frequently. And I've had quite a few complaints about students when they're talking, their mask comes down like this, and, you know, the teacher tells them to put it up. And it's come to a point that some students, they don't even participate anymore. They don't answer questions, anything like that, because their mask falls. So, you know, the mask is a language barrier, and you know, you can't see the emotions of the person. And I think we need to examine this pretty hard. Thank you.
Mr. Freeman?
I'd just like to thank all the teachers for all their hard work getting school back together. I know there's been a lot of sacrifices and things are a lot different than what they were maybe expecting or used to. Thank you for going above and beyond, making Pocosin students the benefactors of that.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Mr. Childress?
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate that too. I'd like to thank the teachers, the school staff, the parents, the students, and everybody else who's involved in having a successful start of the school year. The last 2 years have been very challenging, and with the staff that y'all have here, y'all have kind of helped us navigate through these challenging times, so we do appreciate it a lot as a parent. I definitely appreciate it. I know a lot of the parents came here and supported their kids last month, and I'm glad that they did. And I know the mask mandate wasn't the outcome that some of them have wanted, but I still want to thank them for showing the support to the teachers and the staff and the students, because that's not their fault that they were this way. And I do appreciate you guys showing the support to at least the school.
I think the general consensus, obviously, is that everyone is excited to be back in the building. We just seen the little clip of the young lady. She had to be in 2nd or 3rd grade, mentioning that one of her most exciting things is just the social interaction. Never would I have thought that that would be one of the things that's highly coveted, but that's the environment that we're in now. I wanted to just continue to think about our thoughts and prayers with one of our neighboring school divisions. During this difficult time, I just can't fathom, as a parent or as a student or a staff member, being in the situation that Heritage High School was in. As a parent, we certainly take the fact that we send our kids to school for safe and well-being, and that was disrupted yesterday, and it's unfortunate. So, continued thoughts and prayers to everyone involved, from the top down, because it was certainly a stressful time from a distance, not able to have any impact whatsoever, and some sort of resolution. But and then kudos to our teachers, our staff, the amount of time that our administrators are working behind the scenes. For anyone that thinks that administrator's job right now is an 8 to 5 job is unbelievably mistaken. Seeing firsthand the amount of time and effort that our staff is putting in is extraordinary. And our bus drivers too. I mean, to think that there's a national bus driver shortage. If you've ever been on a bus with any age kids, I mean, it's kind of a tough job, and even at $16 an hour is probably still severely underpaid. But our bus drivers, with Pocosin City Schools, do an exceptional job. So that's all I've got to offer.
Honestly, I was going to say exactly the same thing about Heritage and Newport News. It just breaks my heart what they've gone through. I know that we plan with our police all the time for a what-if scenario. God forbid that ever happens. That's really the only thing I wanted to add.
I just have a couple comments. I wanted to thank Marissa Woodruff for her inspirational reading on kindness. It couldn't have come at a better time. I'm excited about the strategic planning kickoff. Very excited about the great 5-year plan we're going to get, and hoping that we'll get parental involvement, teacher involvement, everybody behind fun. On a personal note, I was very excited to provide traffic control through the Community Emergency Response Team, of which I am a part. And even though it did pour rain, I did have a very generous offer of an umbrella, which later on one of our traffic folks offered to sell his for $150, but passed that up. Anyway, it was very exciting to have something that we could all enjoy in that football game against or with Tab High School. So that was awesome. And a special thanks to the bus drivers for all the backing and forthing and creative ways of getting all our kids to school, because what I saw, what I witnessed watching the kids at the various bus stops that I see every morning was a great deal of enthusiasm for being back. Thank you. Do we have any material for board review? Nothing else? All right. We will be going to closed session following this meeting to discuss personnel matters. And at that, we are adjourned.